Let's go. Welcome into SCARBO KNOWS Chapter 3. We are in the heart of March Madness. I'm your host, Kevin Scarbinsky, and we are going to get right to it. We are pleased to be joined today by the athletics director of one of the best all-around athletic departments in the country, now enjoying another deep run into March Madness with the men's basketball team, and just suffered some serious heartbreak yesterday with the women's basketball team. Let's say hello to Gerg Byrne, the AD at Alabama. Greg, how are you today?
I'm doing good, Kevin. Good to see you.
Thank you for joining us. We've got to first of all talk about that incredible game between Alabama and Maryland in the women's tournament yesterday in the second round. The performance of Sarah Ashley Barker, tied for fourth most points in an NCAA tournament game with 45. And those three free throws that she hit at the end of the first overtime, which were basically make or go home, make or end your season, make or end your college career. And she stepped up with as much confidence as I think I've ever seen an athlete in Crimson. And there's a long list of those. But for the outcome, this was Tua to Devontae Smith on 2nd and 26. This was Elliott Washington in the semifinals of the 1992 SEC men's tournament at the BJCC. This was as clutch a performance as an Alabama athlete has had. And it is a little bit heartbreaking to see it not end in a victory. And you were there.
I was, yeah. I was fortunate to go to our game in Cleveland against St. Mary's for the men's team on Sunday evening, and then I went over to Maryland and was at the game last night. And it was an incredible game. It's probably the best basketball game in the tournament so far, men or women. And obviously we had a lead that we couldn't hold on to, unfortunately, but Sarah Ashley when she went to the line, I'm like, there was obviously huge. We're playing at Maryland against them, and it's loud, it's intimidating, and she knocked him down, and it wasn't, one didn't even bounce in. I mean, it was all just nothing but net. And I thought about it immediately. Obviously, I haven't been at Alabama my entire life, have paid attention to it as long as I can remember. But in all my years, whether my career or my dad's career, I 2 and 26 is a good one. That's one, but even that one, you would have had another play on the next one as long as you didn't have a turnover, right?
Yes.
And it was remarkable, and that's who she is. And want to give Coach Curry a lot of credit. She took over a tough situation here and has had us knocking on the door of the Sweet 16, and with Sarah Ashley's connection to our university and being an Alabama kid, I mean, that's just really cool to see that. But Aaliyah and Zay and other Essence, they all got in foul trouble, and so at the end it was her, and those were our other top scorers too. And so, but I was proud of the team and the resiliency they showed, and I think I heard from a ton of people that I don't normally hear from when I'm at a women's basketball game, who were watching it, engaged with it, and it was something that I think that Alabama fans everywhere were certainly engaged with and trying to do their part and cheer us on to victory. But it was a heck of a game.
Take us behind the scenes a bit, because you have the good fortune as an athletics director of getting to know the athletes, the coaches, the staff members as people, away from the court, away from television cameras. What's it like in those moments after a game like that? As I said, everyone is brokenhearted. They know they left it all out there. They were part of an incredible game, but it's over now. And Sarah Ashley got the most emotional in the post-game press conference when she talked about not being able to play with her sisters anymore. What was that like for you in those moments? How do you attempt to console a coach and some of your athletes?
I think the best thing you can do is just be there. One thing as fans, we're all excited after the wins, right? You got to make sure you're there after the losses too, and especially a tough one, tough one like yesterday. And there's not going to be any words that you can say that are going to console them, but you whether you're give them a slap and five with them or give them a hug and let you know that that you're proud of them, and that's what you do in those situations. And so, um, that's the part that you don't enjoy a whole lot. We all love being in that winning locker room. It's one of the just special places that you can ever be. But as the AD, you got to make sure that you're there after those losses too. One of my favorite sayings, we're with you win or tie, and the tie is questionable. So I think that's often the thought process. So you want to make sure you're there for a win, a tie, or those days you lose too.
You're fortunate to have two very good basketball coaches at the University of Alabama. Nate Oates again on another run. Let's look at some of a partial list of his accomplishments since he's been at Alabama. You hired him in March of 2019. He's in his 6th season. Brendan, if we can put that graphic on the screen and just look at a few of the things. I know this is his 3rd straight Sweet 16. That is 2nd in the country behind Houston, which is in its 6th straight under Kelvin Sampson. But look at this list, Greg. I don't even know where to start. He's at the top or very close to the top or tied at the top in any number of categories in the SEC right now, in program history. And Alabama has had a rich history in basketball that not a lot of people, or maybe not enough people, I should say it that way, aren't aware of.
Right.
Going back to the Rocket 8 and Johnny D in the 50s, and then C.M. Newton and Wimp Sanderson and Mark Gottfried, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Did you envision when you hired Nate Oates this kind of success?
Well, I wish I could say I was a prophet and knew that would be those things were happening, or these things would happen. But when you hire a coach, what you try to do is you try to make the best decision you can, usually in a very tight time frame, right? I had never met Nate Oates, never talked to him before I met him. He and his family. I had Jeff Puritan with me, who's now the AD at Arkansas State. We flew up to Buffalo. He was I think the 4th coach we had interviewed in about 36 hours, if even that long. And basically within 2 or 3 hours of being with him at his house, I was like, I think this guy's different. And one of the things you always challenge your athletes with, you challenge your department with, is how you separate yourself from your competition. And I felt what Nate was doing from a basketball standpoint was ahead of the curve and would separate us in ways that because of what his entire philosophy is based on. And it really starts with his defense. It's not, we struggled at times defensively. We struggled at times a lot last year when we went to the Final Four until the tournament defensively. But we've had plenty of games here where our offense has not clicked in the way we want it to, but our defense has allowed us to win the game. And the defense sets up the offense. And I thought he thought about it in a way that most coaches hadn't, and would allow us to do something that not everybody else was doing. Did I know it was going to lead to all this? I'd be lying to you if I said, oh yeah, I guarantee you that was going to happen. But I thought it gave us a chance to do something that was unique and different. I'll always remember from a football perspective, I was hiring a football coach at Mississippi State. I was only 36 years old. And at the time, the only school in the Southeastern Conference that was running the read option or spread offense was Florida. And so I spent a lot of time trying to study that and realizing that at Mississippi State, we probably weren't going to just line up, with fullback and a tailback and 2 tight ends and run it right over the top of the defensive lines in the SEC. And we went and hired Dan Mullen, and that was Urban's offensive coordinator at Florida. And Dan did a really nice job there. And so that's one of the things. You don't want to reinvent the wheel necessarily, because I don't think that doesn't need to be the go-to. But if you can find something that is unique at this time and where the sport is, to say, okay, what can we do different? to separate us, and you find somebody that fits there with that. And I thought Nate would fit here at Alabama, even though he's an upper Midwest guy, right? And didn't know a whole lot about sweet tea and grits. And I told him, I said, you gotta make sure you have somebody on your staff that does understand sweet tea and grits and has the relationships. And so we kept Petway, and Petway did a great job in bridging that gap for him. And now he obviously, as time's gone on, he has the relationships now, and he has the ability to reach out. So I thought he'd be different. And I always remember Jeff and I are sitting in a hotel room in Niagara Falls. I think we were on the United States side of the border, and it was miserably cold, and the wind was howling. And Dr. Bell had signed off on hiring Nate. He had never met him. He was just trusting what I had to say. And then Ron Gray was the chair of our pro tem of our board. And they gave me the green light, and I sent the tweet out. And I remember saying to Jeff right beforehand, 98% of our fan base is going to go, who the heck is this guy? What's Gerg Byrne doing? Not talking third person, but anyways, we've been very fortunate, and he's done an incredible job. And he's a really good human being, and a guy that you'd want your son to play for.
One of the unique things, and you might have other adjectives for it, as an AD that happens during the NCAA tournament is, and I'm not even going into the transfer portal opening while the season's still going on, but coaches changing jobs. We saw Texas make a change. We see coaches coach their team in the NCAA tournament, get eliminated. You turn around the next day or two, they're getting introduced somewhere else. On the Texas thing, we saw Nate's name linked to that, as Texas having some interest, possibly having made a feeler in his direction. Was there ever anything there from your perspective? Did they ever reach out to you and say, hey, we'd like to talk to him? Or was it just a fleeting thing? Or was there anything to it at all?
No, they never reached out to me. Chris Del Conte, their athletic director, he and I have been friends for 30 plus years. I do think there's he's one of the ones in our industry that if he's going to want to talk to your coach, he's going to give you a call. He would do that for me, just like I would do that to him. And so obviously that's a great thing to have, where your coach is being mentioned for other jobs. That means he or she is doing a really good job where they are. And I would much rather have that. And I know that gets set up regularly, but I'd much rather have to worry about speculation for my coach or going somewhere else because of the job they're doing, rather than having to have the tough conversations where, is this the right fit for your program long term? And that's one thing always, Kevin, when you have this is such an emotional industry, right? And that's one of the things that makes this industry so special. And at the same time too, stability in your coaching staff's a wonderful thing. If you've got the right person that's going after it on a daily basis and working and developing the kids and paying attention to academics and, making sure you're not driving the program in the ditch in the process from rules compliance, whatever that is today. And hopefully there'll be we'll see with the House settlement, what comes with that. But you only ever change coaches if you think it's the right thing for the long-term health of the program. That's it, period. And that can be different things. That can obviously be performance, but that could be off the field or courts, continuous issues, things like that. But it's something to where you need to take that very seriously, because it's people's livelihoods, it's their families, it's their careers. And I want to be a place to where there's high expectations, and that we're going to hold you accountable to high expectations. And at the same time too, if you feel like this coach has the ability to, if they're in a bit of a valley at one point, that they have the ability to get themselves out of the valley and the program of the valley, then you show patience during that time too.
It only gets tougher in the SEC. Texas adding Sean Miller as their head coach. How have you witnessed behind the scenes the progression of SEC men's basketball, the emphasis put on it by the individual schools, the drive led by, going back to Commissioner Mike Slive and now with Greg Sankey? Did you sense this coming through the years, or 7 teams in the Sweet 16? That's never been done before. by a single conference. The ACC had the old record of 6 back in 2016. It really is extraordinary. 14 teams in the tournament, obviously a new record. And now we see the half of those in the second weekend. What was going on behind the scenes, particularly led by the SEC office here in Birmingham, that helped lead us to this point?
I don't like when people say, if you want me to be honest, because when you say that, you say, well, are you not being honest all the other times that you're talking?
Good point.
but I look at it bigger than men's basketball. Obviously, I have a lot of history in the Pac-12. I worked with Sean Miller at Arizona. I'm a big fan of Sean's, and I think he'll do a great job at Texas. He's a heck of a basketball coach, and so I look at it more holistically and realized I hated it to see the Pac-12 end up what happened to it. And I was in the Pac-12 as we started watching the decision making and the challenges that came along with that. I knew that the Southeastern Conference did as good a job as anybody, and Commissioner Slive, Roy Kramer, and obviously Greg Sankey has done a really good job of doing what they can to get the resources to the institutions. And one of the things that we have at Alabama is we have a high expectation level, right? That's what you sign up for when you come to Alabama. And it takes resources to do that. That we have to be competitive from a salary standpoint. We have to be competitive from an NIL standpoint. I know there was controversy after I publicly said, hey, we need help here. And I was like, I just supposed to sit here and act like it doesn't exist. And I also thoroughly believe that you got to be direct with people. If you just try to get people to read between the lines, not everybody's going to be able to do that. No offense to anybody, just people struggle with that. Okay. So back to your question, I really saw the SEC, especially for a lot of sports that maybe historically have had some success, but maybe not as well as it could be, as the Pac-12 started having its challenges and wasn't able to invest in a student athlete the same way that we can here at Alabama. You look at some of our best student athletes we've had in the last 10 years here, even here at Alabama, got a lot of West Coast kids. Bryce Young, right? Najee Harris. We've had kids in a lot of different sports here, and it goes beyond football, who are attracted because of how we support the kids academically, how we support them nutrition, strength and conditioning, mental health, travel, all these things so much better than what we're able to get other places. And if you're
was there a come to Jesus moment? We've heard stories about Mike Slive meeting with the ADs 2014-ish in that area where he said, look, guys, we just have to do better. And it went into scheduling, non-conference scheduling, and subjects like that.
There was some of those things, but I look at more as I still think Kevin was more of a holistic approach to the way we support our kids and the impact that makes, and look at the success we're having in so many different sports that maybe we hadn't had at that level before, other than in a school or two. And so, and men's basketball was part of it, and Commissioner Slive and he brought in Mike Tranghese, the old commissioner of the Big East, who's a strong basketball guy, to help in it, and Greg did too. And so that was really helpful. And then I think because we've had resources that not every league has had at the same level, we've been able to hire some really good coaches at our schools and lead an elite coach. There aren't a lot of them walking around. And so that's why you've seen us be aggressive with Nate, right? And keep him, we were paying him like a Final Four coach before he went to his first Final Four. And then we felt he was something that's very special. You see, we're not, because of what's going on with revenue sharing and NIL and all those things right now, and we're in such a transition, such a huge transition in college athletics right now. I think you're going to see the facility thing slow down. You've already seen some of it, but we're building a new basketball practice facility right now, and that's going to be state of the art, and it's going to be really good for both of our programs. And that's showing because we have, we have a lot of momentum in our men's program, and we had continued improvement and success in our women's program too, which is exciting to see.
One of the other hats you wear is as a member of the NCAA Division I Men's Basketball Committee, aka the Selection Committee. You get accused, as do all members of the committee, with of a lot of things people would call conspiracy theories and how the bracket is set up. The first thing I want to ask is, have you heard from Kelvin Sampson about having to play 2 years after having to play Auburn in the second round in Birmingham, when Houston was the 1 seed, Auburn was the 9. Now he's the 1 seed. He has to play Purdue, the 4 seed, in Indianapolis.
Yeah. I have not. I was actually in Wichita with the committee on Thursday and Saturday. Well, I went there Tuesday, I think, and then I went to Cleveland from there. Houston was in our bracket. I've actually known Coach Sampson since I was in high school. When he was a very young head coach at Washington State University, they had the only varsity team camp on the West Coast, and so we would get in a bus and drive up from Oregon and go. Our varsity team would go play at Cougar Cage Camp. I won't tell you every detail of it, but I got to know him because there was somebody on our team, and this is 100% true, that may have thrown a party. I was not a part of the party. I can honestly say I was not. I did not know about it, but it led to some disruption in the dorm rooms, I guess. And that was the first time I ever met him, because he showed up at our games, and my dad was AD at Oregon at the time. And he said, "Mr. Byrne," or something like that. And I said, "Yes, coach." And he said, "Do you know anything about a party up in the dorm room?" And I said, "No, sir, I don't." And he said, "Do you think this," he told me the kid's name, who's older than me. And he said, "Do you think he could have had something to do with it?" And I always remember, I said, "I don't know if he did, but it wouldn't surprise me." And that was the first time I ever met Kelvin Sampson. And we actually relived that story this week in Wichita. He didn't say anything about his location. I think he's like a lot of coaches, stay focused on what you can control the controllable. And I didn't hear from him when Auburn played Houston and Birmingham, and he didn't say anything about this. Being on the basketball committee has been a tremendous honor, and I know there's controversy every year with it. When it comes to the bracketing, we seat the teams, okay, and then there's principles that you have to abide by, and we vote teams in, we vote teams out. But this is the God's honest truth here too, where we. I always remember we were the number 1 overall seed there a couple years ago, right? And we get to select where we're going as the number 1 overall seed. That's the only team that's guaranteed to get to select to where they want to go as the overall number 1. And then it's based off of the bracketing principles on distance and all those different things. And so we're going to Birmingham. We're excited about that. And then when the bracketing, and it's a combination of a computer system and then the committee doing this together, but everybody gets placed where they're supposed to. And I remember Alabama's in Birmingham. I think this is great. This is going to be a lot of fun for our program and our kids. And then Auburn comes up in Birmingham. I'm like, God dang, our fans are going to think I did that, which I didn't. And my other funny one is, last year, I know there was some controversy about Auburn having to go out to Spokane, and I got accused of orchestrating that, which I didn't. And
so wait a minute. So you're telling me that you didn't orchestrate this year the possibility, which didn't come true, of Auburn playing Louisville and Lexington?
Absolutely not. But I covered up the Spokane. Let's say I did do the Spokane one. I covered it up by putting Alabama there too. Yeah. So I mean, come on, man, that's ridiculous. The matchups are what they are, and it's the parameters that the committee has to stay within are what they are, and so really, when it comes to that, you're just sitting there going, "Oh, okay, I guess what it is," and I can already tell you what the controversy is going to be about it, but I don't really have anything to do with it. And anyways, I guess they didn't have to play Louisville.
I want to know what the secret is, how you manipulate higher seeds losing before they play Alabama. Last year, Grand Canyon staged an upset, so Alabama had to play them in the second round. Now we see BYU beating Wisconsin, so you don't have to play Wisconsin. You get BYU, a 6th seed. What magic dust do you have that creates these upsets that makes an easier path, allegedly, for Nate Oates and company.
Yeah, we've played some really good teams, and we've got a really good team against BYU this week, and I don't have any control over that whatsoever. And you know, when you're on the committee, you're one of 12 voices in the room. You're one of 12 votes when it comes to teams, and there's no jockeying for position or anything like that. It's just I think, and one of the things many things I've been impressed with being on the committee about is the integrity of the process, and I sent a tweet out Saturday late afternoon, and I don't tweet a whole lot anymore, but yeah, I'm paraphrasing. Actually, I could pull it up here real quick. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but basically, it was something along the lines. Yeah, here it is, right here. Saturday morning in the committee room, a lot of debate about final at-large teams that will be selected. Each one has their strengths and each has their warts. First four out will have strong opinions about not receiving a bid. And I said, always the case, understandably. And when you're right on that edge, you're sitting there going over all the analytics. You're looking head to heads. You're looking at, and people look and say, well, they're playing so well in these last 5 games. That's great. That's you look at it, but you also look at the first month of the season too, because those games count as well. And one of the things that somebody said a few years ago when I was first on the committee is the team that you're voting to bring into the tournament. Okay. And that's a big responsibility, because that may be those kids' only chance to ever be in there. You have to vote on the team that will be there. For instance, if you had an injury or two, and when that young man is not on playing for them and they're not going to play in the tournament, and they've struggled when that young man hasn't played, you got to take that into account too. I've been
West Virginia comes to mind on that point this year.
Could be. I've been a big proponent of strength of schedule in football, have I not?
Yes.
And so I look, again, I'm one of 12. I look at that out of that lens, especially at the end. Now, you don't want to make sure that you punish a team to where it hurts another team later on with that. There was a Big Ten team this year that was really strong and had a good team, but their non-conference strength of schedule was like 320. Well, I didn't want us to hurt them, or hurt somebody that would have to play them maybe earlier than they should have because of that. However, if you're on the bubble and you're one of the last few teams we're talking about, and they have a 300 strength of schedule, and you're comparing it to a team with the top 50 even, it's like, okay, they tried to schedule somebody. And I do think that's, at least out of my lens, that's something I pay attention to. But that's part of why you have a committee of 12 people, because each person's going to have a different lens, and that's okay.
All right, we got to wrap this up in a minute or so. As you said, as a committee member, you get assigned. You're at different sites the first 2 rounds. The first weekend, you were in Wichita, so you don't get to see your team in person. But because you were Thursday, Saturday, you got to see them on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
What's it like? Are you watching on TV the first round game? Were you getting a little nervous when Robert Morris was hanging around in that second half? And what's it like now? You'll get to be with Alabama in Newark for the regional.
I will. Yeah. You're absolutely watching your team. Sometimes you have games going on at the same time. We did not in Wichita, so I was able to be they always carve a little space out for the committee, because you're there all day at the arena. And so I went to the committee room and watched the Robert Morris game, and they had a good ball club, and we were fortunate to get through that game. And so, and then depending on how many committee members have teams in the Sweet 16, which, I'm obviously fortunate for us to have Alabama there, they'll excuse you and allow you to be with your team. So last year, I wasn't in Spokane, but I went to Los Angeles and met them and was with them all the way through the Final Four. And obviously I'll get to be with the team as we take on BYU on Thursday, and hopefully we can go play a good game. But it's fun to be a part of. It's really both, obviously, as watching our team most importantly, and supporting them, but also at the same time too, getting to be kind of the insight on college basketball this year.
Well, this has been fun, Gerg Byrne, and this is the one time of year when you can actually cheer for teams, because my bracket has Alabama and Auburn meeting in the national championship game. So I am pulling for the Crimson Tide and the Tigers to stage one more IBOB, which would turn into Armageddon if we see that in San Antonio. Would you mind? Would you love to see that?
That'd be something else. That'd be one for the ages for sure. And obviously we got to be focused on one at a time with BYU right now. But you know, that would be one for the ages for sure.
Well, again, Alabama Athletics Director Gerg Byrne, we appreciate your time today. Good luck to the Crimson Tide the rest of the way, and have fun in Newark.
Thanks, Kevin. Roll Tide.
All right, take care. All right, there you have it. Gerg Byrne, Alabama Athletic Director, the man who hired Nate Oates, who has been as good or better than anyone in the SEC in his 6 years there, trying to get back to the Final Four for the second straight year, has won more championships in the SEC than anyone in the time he's been there with 4. Auburn has 3, Tennessee has 2, and Florida and Kentucky each have 1. So basketball is a different animal now in the state of Alabama than it's ever been, in the SEC than it's ever been, and that's in part due to people like Gerg Byrne. So we appreciate his time today. We're going to wrap it up. It's been an unbelievable NCAA tournament so far. It should only get better from here. 7 SEC teams in the Sweet 16. I'm expecting to see 4 of them in the Final Four. I know the odds. I know the possibility seems crazy, but Florida, Auburn, Alabama, Tennessee. I expect an SEC party in San Antonio. We'll see how it turns out. Thank you for watching. Thanks again to Gerg Byrne. Thank you to Brendan Martin, the best in the business behind the board, making this all happen. And we will see you. Hope you have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you later in the week for SCARBO KNOWS.